Good morning, everyone. My name's Alice Charles, and I lead the Cities and Urbanisation work at the World Economic Forum. You're very welcome to this discussion, which is going to centre around multi-stakeholders and innovative forms of collaboration amongst multi-stakeholders. So what we're going to do today is we are going to have 3 separate sessions. But first of all, I'm going to introduce the topic. So I'm going to give you a very short introductory flavour. Could I have the next slide, please? Sorry. So first of all, why are cities important? We know that currently 54% of the world's population live in cities. We know that 1.5 million people per week are moving to cities. And we know that by 2050, the majority of those cities will be in Africa and Asia. 3/3 of the population of the world will live in Asia. 3/5, I should say. 1/5 in Africa and 1/5 in North America, Europe, and Latin America. So all of the action is happening in Asia and Africa when it comes to cities. We know that cities are rising up. Where the nation state is not acting, cities are continuing to act. So we have 7,500 cities currently committed to the Paris Agreement. And even in the United States, where they've withdrew from the Paris Agreement, cities are still in. We also see that cities are starting to shape the agenda. And we're seeing this, for example, with the recent meeting of the Urban 20, where cities are trying to have a voice at the G20. So yet cities don't have a formal place at the table in the multilateral system. They're not brought into the United Nations program formally or the World Bank program formally. So in the absence of that, we're seeing that cities are finding their voice through mayoral networks, city networks. And some of the best-known networks are displayed here on this screen, from C40 to ICLAI, to UCLG, to Metropolis, to 100 Resilient Cities, the Global Parliament of Mayors, the Global Covenant of Mayors, Mayors for Peace, the OECD, Champion Cities, as well as Eurocities, the US Conference of Mayors, and Strong Cities, and the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. And in fact, there's nearly 300 city networks out there. However, there are political and regulatory barriers to cities in terms of the national government system. And I guess if you think about national government, if they're going to tackle all of the big challenges that they are facing transnationally, they need to find approaches to empower cities, to enable them rather than encumber them, to introduce innovative policies. So if they're going to address climate change, environmental degradation, aging population, increasing polarization, rising migration, terrorism, or the 4th industrial revolution, as we call it at the World Economic Forum, and many of you call smart cities, food security, any of these issues, national governments need to work with cities because that's where the action is happening. I guess what we say at the forum is that we need the multi-stakeholder level of government to work together to transform cities. And some countries are starting to see this. You're seeing in Singapore, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is responsible for the Smart Nation program. You've seen the previous US administration, the US State Department had a cities team. Unfortunately, it no longer exists. But that was an effort to share city-to-city policy at the foreign affairs level. And at the G20, we just had the Urban 20 meeting in an effort to make that happen. So at the World Economic Forum, where I work, we really believe in multi-stakeholder collaboration. Our mission is to improve the state of the world, and in the case of cities, improve the state of cities. Our focus is on providing the platform to allow all of the multi-stakeholders to come together and realize action and bring action to scale. In terms of what we do, we very much ensure that we provide a holistic platform to bring all the stakeholders together, from business to civil society, to young global leaders, to tech pioneers and startups, to social entrepreneurs, our global shapers, who are our young people who are 20 to 29 years old and run Shapers Hubs in 378 cities across the world. Our network of global future councils, which are our think tanks, and one of those central think tanks is on cities and urbanization. The professors that we work with from all over the world, as well as public figures at all levels of government. And all of the work that we've done in cities in the last number of years has been underpinned by multi-stakeholder collaboration. Hence, I feel I'm at the right discussion. So In some of the work that we've done at the World Economic Forum, we've started to look at the preparedness of stakeholders to address the issue of city transformation. And one of the stakeholders that we've seen that's best prepared to address city transformation issues is the private sector. And we see that the private sector can work with government at every level of the urban value chain, from planning through to monitoring. And I think that's something that will be drawn out in today's discussion. Also across the world, we're really seeing a transition from the 3 Ps of PPPs to the 4 Ps. And that's very much putting the public at the center of any partnerships that are developed. So we believe, and in today's discussion, we'll very much frame it, that multi-stakeholder collaboration will help cities on the path to transformation. So what are we going to explore today? We're going to explore the models of collaboration, how collaboration can help a city be more democratic, sustainable, and resilient. We're going to see the emerging and innovative forms of collaboration in cities around the world. So on the agenda, with the very first panel, we have the realization of the SDG's Future City Yokohama program, which is followed by a dialogue with Mastercard and a number of cities focused on multi-stakeholder innovative ways of collaboration and demonstrating the City Possible project. And finally, we're going to look at cities as ecosystems with a multi-stakeholder approach. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very first panel. Our first panel is on the realization of the SDG's Future City Yokohama. And it's my great pleasure to be able to call upon the Vice Mayor of Yokohama to give you a keynote address, followed by questions and answers. But if we turn to the city of Yokohama, I was lucky enough to be on the WWF One Planet City Challenge jury team this year. And Yokohama was really one of the cities that stood out for us. And it was a city that we commended because of the amazing work that it was doing. I think what stood out for Yokohama was, here you had a city that is the electronics hub in Japan and one of the principal electronics hubs in the world. It's the second biggest city in Japan. Yet it has a holistic, sustainable strategy to revolutionize the city. And I guess a number of things that they're doing is, one, they're seeking to drive energy efficiency through the entire city system. They also have a wonderful integrated strategy in terms of driving renewable energy. But they're looking at where their principal emissions are. They have a huge industry sector, and they recognize that most of their emissions are coming from either industry or they're coming from buildings. And why from buildings? Because of the density of population within their city. And they are making businesses report on their emissions. They're also ensuring that public transport is within 15 minutes of any citizen within their city. So I think all of this was underpinned by the Smart City project, and I think it's a really wonderful example of how they're seeking to transform their city. Without further ado, let me introduce the Vice Mayor of Yokohama. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Alice. you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kazumi Kobayashi, Deputy Mayor of the City of Yokohama, Japan. Thank you very much for giving me the great opportunity to make this presentation in such a special conference. Today, I would like to talk about how Yokohama City is solving social issues and creating new value through collaboration with various stakeholders. I will introduce our strong initiatives on today's theme, collaboration, in order to contribute to the Paris Agreement and SDGs.
Try again. Try again. So you can change with. No, you can change it. Joder. Ah, no funciona. No, no estan passant, ho sento. Sorry.
Sorry. To begin with, I will introduce the outline of our city. Yokohama is located 30 kilometers from Tokyo. It takes 20 minutes by car from Haneda International Airport. Yokohama is located in an extremely convenient place. Our population is 3.74 million people. This is the largest among cities in Japan except for Tokyo. The GDP is about $11.5 billion, or 9.9 billion euros. Many companies, such as Nissan Motor Corporation, are located in Yokohama. There are about 120,000 offices now. Apple opened its first research and development center in Asia in 2016. We believe also that engaging in collaboration with various stakeholders is just as important now as it has been in the past. Oh, 16. We are proud that Yokohama is one of Japan's leading cities. This slide shows Yokohama in the 1916s and 1970s, when the population rapidly increased. Due to the sudden population growth and rapid industrialization, various urban issues such as shortage of infrastructure and environmental destruction occurred seriously. In order to overcome these problems, Yokohama City showed the public long-term vision of the improvement of transportation infrastructure, the development of the city center and the suburbs, and so on. The city has promoted a comprehensive urban development under the vision. In order to realize this vision, collaboration between citizens and industry was the most important thing. This is the current Yokohama. In overcoming the challenges of the rapid population growth period, we have continued to collaborate with all stakeholders. As a result, we have been able to create the current Yokohama and make it an environment for its citizens. We believe that Yokohama's greatest strong point is its citizens. We believe also that engaging in collaboration with various stakeholders is just as important now as it has been in the past. Now, dealing with climate change is a big issue. In recent years, natural disasters have occurred frequently in various parts of Japan, and Yokohama is no exception. This summer, Yokohama experienced extremely hot weather, such as has never been seen before, and the Japanese government announced that this extreme heat is a disaster and it risks life. In addition, in 2019, the population will start to decline in Yokohama for the first time. By the year 2025, 1 million people, which are about a third of population, are expected to be over the age of 65. Yokohama must overcome these challenges right now. So I will introduce 3 initiatives about these issues that Yokohama City is working on in collaboration with various stakeholders, such as citizens and businesses. The first is an approach to climate change. At the end of October, Yokohama City declared the goal of their carbon Yokohama. It means we aim to realize carbon neutrality by 2050 or as soon as possible in the second half of this century. In order to realize carbon neutrality, it is necessary for citizens to work on further energy saving and promote the use of renewable energy. Yokohama City was once successful in reducing household waste emissions by 30% through the cooperation of citizens. We will share the goal of zero carbon Yokohama with citizens and businesses, this time as well. We will try to create a chain of measures against climate change, spreading to the whole city. Another key to achieving zero carbon Yokohama is to introduce renewable energy as much as possible. First, we will make efforts to local production and consumption of renewable energy. This means that renewable energy is generated in Yokohama and that energy is used in Yokohama. For this effort, it will be important to use cutting-edge technologies and to collaborate with private companies and research institutes such as members of RE100. In addition, the collaboration with other regions is also important. This is because it is impossible to produce in the city itself all of renewable energy that is consumed in the big city, Yokohama. Therefore, we will work together with other local governments in Japan that is capable of producing a lot of renewable energy. We will also proactively introduce renewable energy produced outside the city. In this way, we will create a city that is skillfully using renewable energy in collaboration with businesses and other municipalities and aim for decarbonization. The second effort is urban development in the city center. Yokohama City started developing the Minatomirai 21 district as a new urban development on the waterfront in 1965, when the population was rapidly increasing. At the beginning, there were docks and shipyards, but we replaced them to develop the new city center. 50 years have passed since the development plan began, and now this area has become a mature city. There are 1,810 businesses. 100,000 people are employed, and 79 million people visit each year. Currently, an area management organization consisting of companies in the district is working on urban development. It takes into consideration the landscape and the environment and will create lively, bustling, and thriving areas. In the Minatomirai 21 district, we made a skyline in which the height of the buildings is gradually lowered from island areas to sea. It makes an attractive and unique cityscape. There are many spaces with a special charm, such as parks at the waterfront and open spaces with public art, water, greenery, sunshine, and so on. In addition, every building has to have common space that connects public spaces and the buildings. As a result, we can create spaces where many people can gather. We are actively making various efforts to create a bus which is suitable for the city center. In cooperation with private companies, we are holding seasonal festivals and events that are attracting much attention. For example, we hold an event which a large number of Pokemon gather. Many people, including foreigners, enjoyed them. Now, the Minato 21 district has become a mature city. Its attractive urban development is proceeding with the businesses in district and visitors. The third effort is reviving the residential areas in the suburbs. In Yokohama, from 1960 to 1970, many railway companies set up railroad construction. At the same time, they developed housing areas and large-scale housing complexes along the railroads. Currently, about 60% of the population lives in these suburbs. It has been nearly half a century since the development of these areas. There are problems such as aging of residents, decreases in population, vacant houses, aging of facilities, rebuilding, and so on. In these suburbs, railway companies who developed the area, local residents, universities, and Yokohama City are now beginning to work together to revitalize these residential areas. We are promoting community development that will encourage people to continue living in these areas. For example, we are opening living laboratory that will restore the vitality of the area using vacant houses. 2, setting up welfare facilities and child care facilities together with rebuilding. Aged station squares and commercial facilities, and supporting for moving from detached houses in inconvenient area to housing complex near the station. Collaboration born through such practices in the city center and suburbs is a driving force to overcome the current challenges of Yokohama. This year, in June, the Japanese government selected Yokohama City as a SDGs future city. This means that we will make excellent efforts towards achieving SDGs. In order to promote efforts as a SDGs future city, Yokohama City has launched an initiative called SDGs Design Center. This is a mechanism to further promote collaboration among various stakeholders such as universities, research institutes, investors, financial institutions, NPOs, local activity groups, and so on. The SDGs Design Center will connect the needs and seeds of various stakeholders and resolve the issues of the three aspects: environment, economy, and society at the same time. Besides, we hope we can contribute to solving global challenges by sharing our results. In 2019, the 7th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, Rugby World Cup 2019, and in 2020, various events of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games will be held in Yokohama. These will be very good opportunities to invite many people from all over the world. I hope you will visit Yokohama on this occasion and see the city that has been developed through collaboration. Thank you for your attention.
Very good. Is there questions from the audience? Is there... So what we're going to do now is, I should have said at the beginning of this session that all of the sessions are designed to be as interactive as possible. So as with every other session, you have the opportunity to put forward your questions through the app system. And we already have 2 questions here from the mayor, and if we have time, the organizers will let me know. If we have time, we might take 1 or 2 other questions from the audience as well. So, so Mayor, the very first question, Vice Mayor I should say, very first question that we have is, what is the proportion of citizens who collaborate in this type of governance?
From here, I will speak in Japanese.
No problem.
とても難しい質問です。
It's a very difficult question.
ゴミの減量に 30%、43% 削減したことには全市民が参加しました。ただし、これいろいろな、例えば子育て、福祉の問題、地域交通の問題ありますけれども、それは大体今、大体ですけど 10% ぐらいです。
It's a difficult question and it depends on the area, but in items like collection of garbage and related issues, most of the population does participate and does contribute, but then in issues related to welfare or education or raising little kids, we could say 10%, so participation is not as high.
So you use different methods to engage different stakeholder groups, different citizen stakeholder groups.
おっしゃる通りで、身近な問題をたくさんの人が参加します。ただ経済に結びつく身近なことが世界の例えば飢餓とか食糧危機に結びついていることとか、自分が今この SDGs に関わることをやっていると経済が活性化するってことはなかなか難しいので、それを分かりやすく説明して市民の参加を増やすことが今私たちの課題というかチャレンジングなテーマです。
So my screen has locked, and whilst the guys are sorting it out here, I'm actually going to take the liberty of asking my own question.
Okay,
One of the things
sorry, shall I translate?
Yeah, no problem.
The answer first. He says that it is. It really depends on the topic. There are things that everybody understands that they are very related to everyday issues, so people participate more. But then there are topics more related to economics or a global scale, which they are also seeing how they can approach and explain easily to people what it entails, so that they can participate more and more actively.
Okay, thank you very much. So just one final question, which is going to be my question. One of the things that you talked about was how you work with different local authorities in Japan, different levels of government in Japan, particularly around your renewable energy strategy. How have you made that happen? How have you worked together? So city government, you talked about working with prefectures, city government, national government.
横浜市はそのゴミの分別から焼却までやります。さまざまな課題を解決しますから成果が必ず上がります。市民も企業も最初は 30% なんかとんでもない。だけど 43% が5年前倒しで達成できました。そういう成果を一つ一つ成果を見せることが一番のポイントだと思います。それが自治体にはできると思います。市がまず一本踏み出して具体化する。わかりました。
Okay. What's important is to create a concrete, specific model that can be shown and that shows results. So Yokohama's been doing it with recycling, for example, say, achieving results of 30%, 40%. When that model is made and you can show results, then other governments, prefecture, other levels can get involved as well.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much for taking the questions from the audience, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So now what we're going... So don't leave. We're about to have our second panel. So it's going to be an interactive dialogue with Mastercard and with the cities of Amsterdam and Dublin, as well as having here represented. So stay tuned.
cozy.
Yeah?
Yes, we're going to get cozy.
Why create distance when we need to collaborate and come together?
So just to let our audience know, we've already decided to be innovative. So we decided to cut the networking session and to allow a little bit longer for this discussion and allow for your questions. And there's lots of time to network outside the room, so make sure you grab everyone afterwards. So what I'd like to do is just first of all introduce the panel. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about innovative ways of collaborating. And it's my pleasure to have Hany here from Mastercard. He's the Executive Vice President for Enterprise Partnerships. We also have Leen from Here Technology, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what you're doing in terms of making best use of all that data that we have around the world. And we have Jamie, who is from Dublin City and leads the Smart Cities team there. I'm originally from Ireland, so if he tells you any porky pies, I will call him out, so he's in trouble. And then we have Ger from the city of Amsterdam, who's the Chief Technology Officer. And as I'm from the World Economic Forum, I have to say I'm really grateful that he's joined our think tank on the future of cities and urbanization quite recently. So thank you for that, Ger. So What I would like to talk to you all about is the innovative methods of collaboration that you're engaging with. And I think if I start with Hany in the first instance, and maybe you would tell us a little bit about City Possible, which you just launched this week, and tell us what is the innovative collaborative model that underpins that and why?
Sure. So we launched City Possible. Can you all hear me, by the way? I can't hear myself. There we go. We launched City Possible this week really with three intentions in mind. First of all, creating inclusion and bringing citizens and the private sector and the public sector together in one common place. That's really important to us. The second thing is powering up sustainable economic growth. And I think we heard some great examples of that from the Deputy Mayor of Yokohama. And then the third one is really about creating efficiencies. So City Possible really came about, and it has three components to it. The three components are a thought leadership environment where many partners, including all those here on the stage and you all as well, and many people who are here, are getting together with academia, the private sector and the public sector to really think about the biggest challenges that are facing cities and communities around the world. And really in one place be able to share very openly and really create a cohesive, intelligible, digestible narrative and arena where we can share best practices in a way where each city really should be starting its work not from the beginning but where the last city finished. And I think there's several examples of that we'll talk about. So that's really the premise of this thing. The second part is we're actually then partnering with cities, including those on the stage and with private sector partners, Leen being one of them, and there are others here as well, where we're actually co-creating solutions to some of these biggest challenges. And that we're really excited about because what underpins that is really a few very fundamental principles. First of all, they're all partnership based. So, which really takes me to one of the topics in your question, Alice, that we believe that the word partnership has been misused and misused and misused over time. And our vision and our hope for what this word will come to mean, and that's why we use the word City Possible, is that these partnerships are multilateral. These partnerships bring together people who are at the top of their game in terms of what they do to create solutions that are open, that are based on open standards, that are widely available and widely shareable across the world, frankly, to generate those efficiency goals, those inclusion goals, those sustainability goals, very broadly. So that's an important principle for us, and that's what we're doing in that second part. And then the third part of City Possible is really how we scale these things. So really this is allowing us to say, how do we create consortia and partnerships where all those involved are able to take the work that's being done and share it freely, which includes, by the way, cities sharing with each other, not just individual private sector companies, so that literally anybody in the consortium can access the work within the consortium and share it with anybody else. That's really our hope and our vision, which is a very radically different model that we believe and we have not seen previously in this environment. It's not anchored in individual corporate commercial success, although we believe that everyone involved in this is going to benefit very substantially, and we're not ashamed of that in any way. But we really believe that this ability to share openly based on common standards and make these things viral, if you like, in terms of how they're shared, that's really the way we move forward to address these topics that are not topics for today or fashionable topics. These topics around cities are really the challenges of our age, not even our generation, but really of our age.
Very interesting. Actually, the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on Cities and Urbanization was just meeting this weekend in Dubai. Yeah. And one of the big things we were talking about was, given the IPCC report, that we're talking about city survival now.
Right.
And we were talking about the fact that we're seeing a lot of projects in cities are not getting to scale. So they're not getting beyond the pilot stage. So, you know, how are you addressing that? How are you seeking to get from pilot to scale?
It's a great point. So we are not fans of pilots, particularly where you've got consortia of people who know what they're doing and are really good at it, and clear, tangible articulation of what the problem statements are to begin with. One of the things where we find pilots are misused or overused is where the work hasn't been done to articulate what is the impact on citizens, what is in it for the cities, and what's in it for the private sector or the players that are involved. Pilot seems to be a shortcut way of skipping that step. We think that's a really bad idea to do that. We think it's worth spending the time to articulate the problem statements clearly, make sure that the citizens, make sure that all the parties involved are clear on what the goal is, what the outcomes should be, etc. And then if you've got people who are really good at what they're doing, you can effectively, and I say this carefully, you can effectively skip the pilot stage. You're really going more to a soft launch and then an evolutionary step that scales. That's one thing. The second thing is we're not fans. We hear a lot from different parts of the world, but we're different, or but our market is different, or but our technology is different. Honestly, we think a lot of that is nonsense and just noise of people trying to create differentiation for the sake of differentiation, or competitive lockouts, or barriers to entry. We don't agree with any of that. So we're really fans of open standards, open architecture, and rapid scaling, and iteratively evolving solutions in that way. And I think that, for us, that's the thing that really overcomes that phenomenon, which we also see, as you do, that, you know, lots of pilots and none of them ever scale to anything.
Thank you, Hany. So maybe this is the opportunity to bring in the city voices, given that we've got two in the panel. And I'm going to start with her. So could you tell us why you invest in developing collaborations within your city and with the private sector, with civil society, with citizens, how you go about it and why you're involved in City Possible?
I would say it's it's interesting times it is in that perspective, basically, because we used to do public-private partnerships in terms of we were procuring something and then we start to use it, and you're doing a bit of joint development when you were lucky, basically. Business development budget for companies, and cities put in a bit of effort. Since we're now in the digital age, not in the industrial era anymore, it's about, I mean, we don't know, so sometimes I'm a bit fan of a pilot, not because of technology, because that will work, not because of standardization, because that's something you need to discuss, but to find a way, how do you collaborate with a company and a public sector, etc. So in terms of governance structures, because we don't know yet what's the role of the government in the digital age. I mean, what's our role with regards to data? I mean, we manage roads. I mean, we're pretty good at managing roads nowadays. We're practicing that for 400 or 500 years, road management. And now we need to play a role in the data world, basically, as well. So when you want to create partnerships, I mean, here is a great example. I mean, also other navigation companies for the same thing. But when we used to do traffic management ourselves. Nowadays, everybody watches his device or his navigation screen in the car. So actually, traffic management is being done by private sector. And then, not always, it takes care of air quality or children wanted to cross the street, or grandma in an elderly home, etc. And we take that into account in our traffic management. So coming back to your question, I mean, we invest in public-private partnerships because we see that in the digital layers on top of the city, basically, new roles are being developed, and we need to find ways to make sure the public good is included in the stuff we do. So we make agreements with every navigation company in the world, say, hey, can we push a few things to you? Don't use this street because there's a school at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when kids wanting to cross the street, whatever. Air quality is crap over here. Not in Amsterdam, obviously, with brilliant air. But hypothetically, air quality is crap over here. So let's reroute traffic or something. So, I mean, for us guys, that's the reason why we invest quite a bit at the moment in partnership with organizations, because especially now in the digital era, I mean, who plays the role in, who's the user interface? I mean, people don't go to Amsterdam.nl to see how traffic is being managed, basically. I mean, they go to Google Maps or here or whatever. So from our perspective, I mean, this is an interesting journey. And the interesting thing about City Possible is an interesting way to collaborate, because, I mean, cities are crap at collaboration. And this is very logical, because when Jamie would build a bridge in Dublin, he would do the PowerPoint to me, and say, hey, this is a brilliant bridge we've built, basically, and it's a brilliant bridge. And then we start to develop our own bridge with our own, and then we do the PowerPoint, yeah, this is our bridge, basically. But we're not very good in intense collaboration. And we need consultants to tell them what they've done over here and to do it again at our place, basically. But it's sometimes logical, sometimes a waste of money, because things are copy-paste, etc. Because you're right, bridges everywhere the same, I mean, and the same goes over here. So the interesting thing is, in that perspective, how can we, in digital age, with software and data, etc., hey, this is something you can exchange pretty fast. And what we can learn from the open source community is actually for the first time in history that millions of people collaborate on the same stuff, sharing stuff, etc. And then again, as cities, we need to learn. So the City Possible is a nice way to do that, because I was in a meeting, I'm not sure what colleagues of you, I think, where every city was bragging about we have GitHub and we put open source in it, etc., etc., etc. And then you ask, is there someone in this room actually took a look at other person's open source software or other GitHubs? And nobody said yes. So we opening stuff up, but we're not looking at what other people actually are doing. So in this collaboration, I think we're actually, well, a level deeper. Hey, what are you actually doing? How are you making your cases? How you interact with the citizens, etc. So, I mean, and this is something we should learn as well. Because, I mean, yeah, you have international officers talking to each other, which is brilliant, but in the end, real collaboration should be about content, relevance, etc. Because that's the energy. And, well, and we collaborate quite well together, I would say, share stuff. I mean, also we translate stuff in English sometimes, because Dutch, unfortunately, is not conquering the world yet. Well, except in Belgium, probably. But so it's very simple things, but also a bit more complicated things. I mean, we just did an exchange of people with New York, example given, being there for 2 or 3 months and see what actually is happening, and not only the PowerPoint and the marketing bullshit.
Thank you very much, Ger. So maybe the same question for Jamie. You're also in quite a unique position in Dublin, that you've got a lot of the big technology companies have their Europe and Middle East headquarters there, and you've quite a good startup scene that's happening as a result. So how are you managing to leverage that in the overall collaborative mechanisms that you're developing in your city?
And combine that with building walls and everything at the northern border, isn't it?
Oh, well. It's not Brexit, is it?
Let's not talk about Brexit.
Talk about that.
Don't get me started.
But yeah, no, so I think there's a really important role for a city to play in this whole space, and just being the independent broker. And I think people realize how important that role is. And really what we're trying to do is just orchestrate startups, researchers, the big tech companies, to come together, because we don't in the city have the right expertise or know how to solve. I mean, we saw a lot of the big challenges in the first presentation. I mean, we just don't have those skill sets, but we know what we have as a problem in our cities, and there's lots of them. So if we can articulate, what the different things are, our priorities, what are we trying to address, then we can start engaging with the market, with researchers, startups, and run programs that actually do something not just for tech, but it's actually for doing something that's actually real and meaningful. And I think, I think Ger's just articulated quite well. I mean, the market's moving very fast. Technology adoption has just gone crazy. Cities are a little bit behind, and we're trying to kind of figure out, I suppose, how do we shape that future in a way that is good for citizens. It's not about profit-driven technology. We've seen where that goes.
Yeah.
Monetizing off every bit of data. So I guess cities collaborating together globally, is so important in this future. And I think what really pisses me off is all these companies trying to sell me stuff, and they have no idea what it is I need.
Yeah.
They have no idea what the issues I have are. And I think what we're starting to see is a whole group of cities internationally starting to engage with companies to say, well, guys, instead of coming to us with what you think the solution is, why don't we co-create the solution? Because you've no idea what we'll pay for that solution. We know it could be something big, but let's work out what it is we're trying to create first. And that's why I love the City Possible. Like there's a couple of companies starting to say, well, actually, let's hire people who worked in cities, like Miguel. Let's figure out how we collaborate with cities and understand how we can build new products and solutions that add value. Instead of coming in with like a pricing model that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a side conversation before this started about how cities face all of these technology companies coming in trying to sell kit. And often kit is created in Silicon Valley and doesn't meet the local context, but They actually needed to do it the other way around, ask the city what they need. But another dilemma that we talked about in the context of cities was trying to break down the internal silos within your city authority to actually deliver transformational change. Do you want to maybe talk about that, Jamie? And I'll ask you as well here how you go about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of key things you need. If you're going to do this and do it well in your city, you have to have a mayor or the top level chief executive buy-in, because these silos are damn hard to break. Like everyone's comfortable with, the bin is a bin that collects trash or waste. But like if you want to start advertising on that bin, or you want to start deploying, different solutions off that bin because it's got power and it's got a solar panel, that cuts across lots of different departments in an organization, and the guys who do the waste have no interest in that. The same with street lighting. Street lighting, traditional, the most boring asset in a city, now is the hottest asset in a city. And I tell you, the street lighting teams have no interest in small cells and all the different IoT things that you can deploy on that. So it goes. Everything we look at now is cutting across different departments, different sectors, and the business model is just getting really exciting. But that's like massive change. It's culture and awareness as well. So I think if people don't know what the future opportunities are, they won't even think about them, they won't buy them. So it's awareness as well, governance, leadership, and a little bit of seed funding to kind of cut across those departments to make stuff happen.
So how are you doing it in Amsterdam here?
Well, I would say, obviously what Jamie says is true, but also I would say it's, for us, it's asking the right questions. I mean, we don't talk about care anymore, about health. We don't talk about cleaning, but clean. So that means you can take prevention into account. It means you can avoid to make a mess in your city. That's clean as well. So we used to have, and every department has KPIs on, we want to help more people who live in poverty because we want to help more people.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to help anybody at all because we want to avoid poverty. So while our KPIs on helping more people, which actually is a ridiculous KPI. So because the incentive for us is let's start to help more people, and actually more poor people makes it easier for us to get to our KPI, which is not exactly what we meant to do. And the same thing happens to private sector at the moment, I would say. I mean, the interesting thing is we're now into an age where we can reset a few things. So selling more energy is not a business model anymore. It still is, obviously, but you don't want that to be the business model. Selling more cars is a business model. Hey, we want to have less cars, isn't it? So this is an interesting era to make sure we get KPIs right.
Right.
So for the government for us guys now, our digital transformation program is basically, hey, what are the questions we should ask, basically? And not, hey, can we clean more? No, can we make sure it's clean? Can we make sure people are healthy instead of giving them more care? So for us, it's more and more about digital transformation, about resetting your KPIs, your goals, and put incentives in the right place. And in the city collaboration and in the collaboration with private sector, this actually is the same thing. And that's the reason why it's hard for cities to collaborate with, well, a traditional energy company, example given, as long as their incentive is sell more electricity made from coals. Well, you can collaborate whatever you want, but it always will stay a pilot. I mean, that's the interesting thing about pilots. That's why we do tons of pilots, corporate social responsibility type of pilots, et cetera. But you will scale it the moment you have a decent question behind it, which has a feasible business model, which contributes to our sustainability or et cetera. So I would say asking the right questions, and that's the only way to get out of the silos, because the silos are operations. They want to do stuff better and more efficient, et cetera. And they're right, they should. But as well, you should make sure you involve others because they have the same incentive to do so.
So you're more of a strategist. So turning to Leen, speaking of strategy, I guess I was talking to Carlo Ratti recently, and he was talking about when he set up the Sensible Cities Lab in MIT, that there was, a relatively small amount of data, if you like, 12 years ago that was available on an individual person, and you could anonymize it. Now there's just so much, it's exponential. So in that era, you're very much operating in the mobility space. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your business does and how you're collaborating with cities, and indeed City Possible?
Okay, I will. So within Here Technologies, we provide or we create location-based content and location-based services. So we are all about the X, the Y, and the Z, and bringing people and vehicles or a device of movement from point A to point B. So that means we have always been talking to cities and to different government government layers with all the countries around the world. Because on the one hand, they provide us their material, and on the other hand, we standardize all that information that we get, and we push one global standard out. And then the clear example is it goes into your in-car navigation device. With all the technological changes happening, we got within our company and within our organization a lot of questions. Help us. How do we need to adapt infrastructure for autonomous vehicles? We have congestion problems. How do we need to fix them? European Commission, CO2 emissions need to go down. So we started to talk to cities and to counsel them and actually also consult them on what is the next step to be done. And we also went into projects. Yeah, that we say, oh, let us fix this. But we are stemming everything from the location angle. So as soon as you're talking about providing a service to cities, the question becomes, how are we going to pay for that? What is the business model? How are citizens going to pay for that? So we quickly came into the realm of payment. And we stated within Here Technologies, we don't have a clue how to do that. So we stated, okay, we were also looking at scaling it up because we were being addressed from all cities and government levels from the globe. So basically we started thinking and we started to talk with Mastercard. And I think that was a little bit more than a year ago. And we were, so I had a conversation with Hany at CES, so a 3-minute conversation that he basically put me on the line, on the spot and said, okay, you're responsible for smart cities within here, how do you look at this? And I think I did a short elevator pitch. I said, okay, Hany, we are completely being swamped with projects which do not go anywhere. It's prototyping, we cannot scale. It's a huge problem. We provide one piece of the puzzle. This is not coming together because cities need real solutions. So we are really stuck in that. I want to talk to you because we need to have payment. Then I say we provide a lot of thought leadership towards cities. We need to help them because tech is changing so fast. And I also see a lot of cities going very deep within the tech space. But then I say, okay, this is to what Ger said. What is the role of the government going forward? If you think about data, digital data, it's about privacy concerns. How do you deal with that? And after 3 minutes, Hany was like, oh, we need to talk. Because this is completely aligned with the Mastercard view. So I was like, okay, we need to talk. So our executives started to get together. You explained your view about City Possible. And we were like, bang on, this is smack in the middle, bullseye. We need to make this change. And it's the industry who needs to come together and help cities out. Because it's an illusion to think that one private company can fix all the city problems.
Yeah.
Forget it. This is not possible. Mastercard does the payment. We are all about location. You have then utility companies about the lighting. But lighting also has a location element to it. And that is the only way the private sector needs to come together with the public sector to really start making sense out of all this. And also to make it easier for other cities to say, okay, I want to have exactly the same as what Dublin does or what Amsterdam does. And then you are going to get a cross-fertilization. And that's why we are also, and me personally, a heavy supporter of City Possible, because this is clearly the only way how we are going to make this work.
Excellent. So I'm actually going to ask you all to think about the applicability of what we're talking about in the Global South. So I spoke at the very beginning about the fact, in 2050, only 1/5 of the world's population will be in Europe, will be in North America, will be in Latin America. So the action is happening in cities, in Asia, in Africa. So if we think about that context, I'm just wondering, how can you scale what you're doing? I'm first going to ask Leen, and I'll ask the rest of you as well. How can you scale what you're doing to Asia, to Africa?
So if I can first focus on Asia, and Asia is broad, right? For me, China is special in itself because whatever we do, we are confined to regulation and legislation. And there you see that the political environment is having a heavy impact on what happens on China mainland. So that means location data cannot leave the borders. So what we do there is we work together with a company, Navinfo, and they do all the cooperation for us within local cities. What do we bring to the table? That's those data standards. Yeah, if you talk about autonomous vehicles, within here we have a standard that's called Sensoris. They also adapt Chinese data within Sensoris. If I then look out of China, and South Korea is similar. Let me be honest, you have China and South Korea very similar. If I look at the rest of Asia and Southeast Asia and Indonesia, Malaysia, there is also a lot of things happening. We have already location-based content, so the mapping. We also provide that towards the cities, and we are also working with them. So it's also the intent of City Possible, not only to focus on Europe and North America, but also include those areas, India, for instance. So things are being set up. South Africa, we also do work there. Also there we have the location-based content. Africa, indeed a lot is happening, but it's still early days. So we are also looking into it. How can we help? We did, for instance, a project with Cape Town where we took pictures of their entire city so that they could digitize that content. Because in Africa, a lot is happening, but we are talking about digital content.
Yeah.
So still a lot needs to be transferred from paper into a digital content. So in Africa, there we are looking at, okay, how can we help them? How can we address it? Cape Town is now one example. Should we do more in Africa? Yes, yeah. But that is also with these kinds of initiatives, City Possible, it becomes a starting point as well, so that we can then also more easily transmit it towards those cities in Africa as well. So it's always dependent where you're looking at all across the globe, what their level of digitization is, and how we really can contribute to that.
Hany?
You know, Leen makes a number of great points here, and I think one of the premises within City Possible is this notion of standards and rapid deployment and scale to bring about efficiency. You know, there are, you know, and here I said this earlier, you know, we're not talking about air quality, we're talking about the health of citizens. You know, Jamie is talking about things in Dublin that are not just about ticking the box of an initiative or an objective, but what does that actually mean? So I think in the partnerships that are struck around these things, a couple of really important things happen. For instance, you know, people think about us for payments. We do that really well, and we actually do, you know, universal payments across our company. But that's one small part of what we do. This journey with City Possible and this journey that we've had in the enterprise space has allowed us to think about other core competencies that we have that we bring to the table. So for instance, why did we create City Possible and it's not got Mastercard branding all over it? Because it's co-owned by all these people. It's co-owned by the people that are part of it. We're convening it. We're bringing it together around open standards. We think, and then when we thought about our network and think about, you know, the network of people like Here Technologies, whatever, you know, today they carry location data, today we carry anonymized payment data. But by the way, our network doesn't care if it carries soybean contracts or medical records. But we're doing what we do in our day job, and we're challenging each other to stretch the useful life of the assets and expand the value of the assets. That's how we unlock value for our companies and how we actually make money, as opposed to turning up, as these guys have been saying, with, you know, a purchase order for a new toy. That's quite a different way to think. The other thing that I think is really important, and we're doing this in City Possible, is getting underneath all these challenges and things we're trying to solve and saying, what are the alpha blocks underneath all this? So you need to have universal, secure identities for people. You need to be able to, you know, we call that persistent authentication, verifying that you are who you say you are all the time. That's a universal need across the world. We're not talking about doing that by breaching data privacy or saying, oh, in my country we don't care about privacy, whatever. No, we care. In fact, we were one of the first companies to say we're going to be GDPR compliant across the entire world, regardless of what region you're in. But that's a building block. Open common standards, that's a building block. Interconnectivity around data, that's a common building block. And you start to think about these fundamental alpha blocks that are there, and you start to be able to say, well, how do I apply those alpha blocks to solving for health challenges around diabetes, or health challenges around asthma, or health challenges around obesity? You know, one of the things we did that's sort of related to what we're talking about in cities is, you know, we partnered with the World Food Program to provide, we set ourselves a goal to provide 100 million meals. And we didn't know this when we started. We actually got it done in 1 year. And not by writing a check as a charity. We actually did it through changing our business model. But guess what? You know, there's a long-standing joke in the world that says, oh, you know, what do you think you're going to do, solve world hunger? But guess what? You know how that 100 million meals per year, which is what we've got to as one company, you know what that does? That feeds the entire hunger of the world for 1 day. If 360 others got together and did that, we could together as a community alleviate hunger in the entire planet.
Wow.
That's a big deal. That's when you think city possible, that's what we've got to be thinking about. Goals like that and not being afraid of those audacious goals. How do we eliminate type 2 diabetes? How do we eliminate hunger? How do we eliminate exclusion, social exclusion for people in the world? So we get underneath those things, and that's how you scale. You think about the building blocks, you make sure they're robust and secure, they're not competitive, they're open, and they can scale.
Fantastic. So that's how we get from the second industrial revolution to the fourth very, very quickly in many parts of the world. So just wondering, Ger or Jimmy, do you have any particular partnerships with cities, for example, in the global south that you think is assisting them in leapfrogging?
Well, I think successful city, I mean, you have two types of city collaborations. First of all, people who work on the same topic meet once in a while. That's to get acquainted with what you're doing, what's happening. That's to make links. But the most important thing is that you collaborate on certain topics. I mean, it doesn't work when you, I mean, city, like I said, I'm not very good in collaboration because the person responsible for the city collaboration talks to the other person for city collaboration about collaboration and how often do you meet. So nothing wrong with that. It has a role as well, probably. But I mean, when you really want to solve, you need to have some kind of a challenge. Like, I mean, affordable housing is a challenge we face. Poverty is something we face every city nowadays with digital divide, and the divide is getting bigger in every city in the Western world at the moment, I would say. So real collaboration is on these topics, basically, because then you get your own professionals at the table working on that topic, and then you have a sense of urge to actually come to something. So when you see when it goes wrong is that people, well, taking the little papers and think of problems together, which you can do together, and you have a list with 15 things, and then, well, let's see how it works. No, I mean, you really have to feel a sense of urge. I mean, we collaborate great with cities on sharing economy because there's a sense of urge that Airbnb is everywhere. And we need to find ways to cope with it because we love Airbnb, but not that much at that place at the same time. So, I mean, we need to find ways to collaborate based on certain issues and topics. And that works quite well, actually. So that's also for city possible. I mean, something we need to find out a bit, basically. But we need to, well, I like the big thinking. What is the economic divide in cities at the moment? Affordable housing. I mean, these are the big topics. When you ask people in Amsterdam what are the biggest issues, it will be housing, too much tourists, and we need more bicycle lanes or something. And we have some empty prisons, which are crap to demolish. But so, I mean, but these are the things.
But when you go anywhere in the world, housing is one of the top 3 challenges that a mayor will raise, you know, so that's certainly a story right across the world. I'm conscious that we want to bring in the audience, so do we have some questions already submitted that I should be asking?
Sorry. I might just add to that. I mean, I think one of the challenges we have is that when cities get together, they tend to kind of, you know, look at how great they are and talk about projects, didn't we do this brilliantly? But in fact, actually, the best type of collaboration is talk about how shit you are.
Yeah.
You know, what are the mistakes?
I heard a mayor say that the best question to ask a fellow mayor is, tell me about the solution that you've employed that has the greatest cost benefit. It was one of your worst challenges and has the greatest cost benefit, and I think that's a good way to look at it. So do we have questions from the audience? No, we don't have questions.
So I'm going to add one more point, Alice, which I think is pertinent to this conversation, and that is, and you've both touched on it, this question of cost and how we deal with cost. There is an awful lot of structural inefficiency that doesn't get recorded in the way we think about what we do in cities. And make it real for you. Most cities' transport systems, and the Deputy Mayor of Yokohama talked about this, and all these guys have experienced it, run on proprietary technology that has a static cost base of about 15%. That's the cost of actually running just the business of ticketing and moving people around. Well, guess what? We know from practical experience working with London and Chicago and other cities that cost can be reduced from 15 down to about 8%. That for a big city like London is about £100 million a year in savings. So you talk about how do we pay for these things? We pay for these things in the first place through savings and through unlocking these efficiencies. And we do that by acknowledging that the inefficiencies exist, and then we go after them with partnerships, with clever ways of thinking, city to city, partners like here, like Mastercard, like Microsoft, like many others, to say what else can we unlock. And then when we start to think multimodally about the capacity in cities, we get to another very interesting topic, which is demand management. So Ger mentioned tourism, and he's been very courageous to think about this bold topic of optimizing tourism, not locking people out, but saying how do we optimize tourism. You know, Jamie has a different set of challenges and others do as well, but the principle is the same. We're managing demand actively to improve efficiency and yield and use those savings to pay for other things.
I think you mentioned a really good point, because we often hear about the infrastructure finance challenge, but you need to start with how can we get efficiencies within our existing infrastructure before we start providing new infrastructure. Are there any questions from the audience? I see someone in the front row, if somebody could get a microphone to them. And if you could just say who you are and where you're from and what your question is.
Microphone.
And actually tell us if it's directed towards one person or everybody.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michael from Sweden. Been visiting both Amsterdam and Dublin to check out what you do. And one of the things that usually come up are the new small companies with new solution that are not yet standardized, but need to get onto the market. I would like to hear something about more innovative ways to collaborate with those rather than just office space in an incubator, but something next thing to work with.
And your question is for Ger and Jamie?
For Ger and Jamie.
Okay.
I mean, I might come in. Actually, one of the programs we run is, we talked about a great, startup ecosystem in most of our cities. So we have like a challenge-based program where we look at that pre-commercial piece, where they've got good ideas, but they need access to, test sites. They need access to expertise from the city to co-create the solution. And we have a program where we seed from these guys, take no equity, and run through a couple of phases to give them that opportunity to, do it in Dublin, get the experience, build a product, a solution, and hopefully scale, and we buy it at the end. And we've run about 11 different challenges across different areas, mobility, energy, and looking at how can we support this locally, and really give them the opportunity to say they've done it and hopefully scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do a project more or less similar, Startup in Residence, where we actually put challenges to the market, but it is procurement. And the interesting thing about the program is that, last round we had 13 participants, and we run 3-4 a year, and nobody noticed that we actually were doing a European tender where they applied for, because we made it a bit more slick in look and feel, basically, but we did. So what we do is we collaborate then 3 to 6 months with them, put in our staff a bit of money, but not that much, because it needs to be a bit of a work together basically as well. And after the period we can actually procure the product. And the interesting thing is you see a big difference between traditional accelerators and these types of accelerators in terms of companies that join, because these are actually companies, startups who want to solve an issue. And in a traditional accelerator they've been pivoting all around to earn more money somewhere. So what you see is a different type of entrepreneur who actually wants to solve a city challenge. Obviously wants to earn money, nothing wrong with that, but not pivoting to where the money is, pivoting to where how can we solve something really, actually. And that's what I like in this type of entrepreneurs, and that's why we think it's hard to collaborate with venture-driven accelerator programs.
Great.
So that's why you try to organize it internally. And actually it's a good example, because we collaborate quite a bit on the learnings on these challenges and how to cope with procurement, example given. And then you see that law is not really the problem. Culture in your organization is a bigger problem, at least in our organization.
We also encourage a lot of those startups to come to City Possible and be part of this so that they can partner with larger organizations. One of the challenges we experience almost exclusively with many startups who have clever ideas is that they can't scale globally. They might be able to do something relevant for a city, but you can't take it anywhere. So getting them to partner up together with larger organizations so that they can be part of the dialogue and part of the ecosystem is a really important step as well. And we don't see that happening very much in cities. We see this isolated bilateral conversation going on too much, and we think that needs to change and evolve a little bit.
So you heard it here, connect with Hany on City Possible, get involved. So unfortunately we've ran out of time, so if we don't have time for any more questions, you're just going to have to network with these people. So thank you very much for your attention. We're going to move on to our third panel, so don't go anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so welcome everybody to this next panel that I'm going to be moderating. My name is Cristina Garrido. I'm the Director of Innovation and Strategy at Anteverti, a consulting company for smart cities. And I am also the Congress Manager for the Smart City Expo World Congress event organized abroad. I also direct the blog Cities to Be, where we have experts talking about cities from all over the world. And I'm going to introduce this next panel. Participation and collaboration are two key words when we talk about cities nowadays. As we have learned through the last years, since these two concepts arise in urban discussions, they are not unidimensional phenomena, but they can be approached from very different perspectives and fields. We can talk about citizen participation, about public administration and citizenship collaboration, about public and private partnerships, what we know as PPP. And not only that, we can also talk about city-to-city collaboration, living labs, startups, entrepreneurship, or we can even discuss how technology can be a tool to facilitate new models of collaboration or make the traditional models more effective. Today, in this third panel, titled Cities as Ecosystems, a Multi-Stakeholders Approach, we have the experience of 4 different cities and companies who are using collaboration in an innovative way. So we're going to welcome our panelists on the stage. We have Ms. Jennifer Sanders. She's Executive Director of Dallas Innovation Alliance. Hello, Jennifer. We have Mr. TJ Costello. He's Director of Industry Solutions Group, Smart Connected Communities and Transportation from Cisco, Manchester, Massachusetts. We have Mr. Fatih Gundogan, the Deputy General Manager of ISBAC, Istanbul IT and Smart City Technologies. Welcome, Mr. Gundogan. And we also have Dr. Weibin Lee, the Commissioner of the Department of IT from the city of Taipei. Welcome. So we're going to give the word to our first speaker, Jennifer.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm so thrilled to be with you here today and just want to first say what an amazing conference and event this is, because I think I feel so lucky at how cities are working together and how much I can learn from each city, and there's really no substitute from being able to sit across the table from someone and really have those conversations, with Cisco Solutions being a close second to sitting in the same room as someone, obviously. And so what I'm here to talk to you about today is Texas and how we are able to work together across the major cities, taking different models to approach collaboration in smart cities, and how that's elevating everyone. But first, I just wanted to get one thing out of the way, because I know what most of y'all think when you think of Dallas and of Texas, particularly internationally. So, you may think of cowboys. You may think of the Dallas Cowboys. You may think of J.R. Ewing for the TV show Dallas, and oil and gas. And so that's all part of our heritage, and we're very proud of that. But how we think of Dallas today is a little bit different. So we were ranked the number 11 tech city in the world, up 17 spots over the last year, and we're the top city in Texas in terms of that. And a lot of that ranking this year was based on urban innovation. 22 Fortune 500 headquarters. We have the 9th largest concentration of tech jobs in the US. 360 people move to the region a day, and that's net. 19 smart city globally, and everything's bigger in Texas. We do still believe that. So we think big, we dream big, and we sometimes succeed, but we always know that we've gone all in. And so just to really level set a little bit with the state of Texas, and a lot of y'all are familiar with this, but perhaps not. So geographically and landmass speaking, Texas is larger than Spain, the country that we're in right now. Our GDP is equal to Canada. If we were a country, we'd have the largest economy globally. But the question is, in terms of all of the infusion, particularly into our cities and urban environments in Texas, how do we handle this type of growth given the aging infrastructure and the other limitations from a resource efficiency standpoint. And so the answer, not to be corny, is that Texas cities are doing it together. If you think about the sprawl of Texas and considering it's the size of a country, and you think about we have to really take a strategy that takes into account very different types of parts of the state from a density perspective. So we have to have roads connecting all of those, obviously, but pavement and crumbling infrastructure, and then you take into account these dense urban environments. So cities over the last several years in Texas, and these are 4 examples of dozens that I could stand here all afternoon and give you, but I have 5 minutes, and so we're not going to do that. But just wanted to briefly talk this through. And so the 4 initiatives we're talking about today, the common thread is this concept of collaboration and partnership. No one can do it alone. No sector can do it alone. No one has completely figured this out yet. And so the other common thread that you might notice is, when we talk about building communities for all, and that being really the basis of this year's conference, but really the underlying objective for everyone on this stage and everyone in this room, building communities for all includes all sectors within our community, whether that's socioeconomically, whether that's race, whether that's gender. And just speaking to the global focus on women empowerment, it's noteworthy to note that a lot of the initiatives in Texas are all led by women, which is really heartening to me, kind of compared to some experiences I've had in the tech industry. And nationally and globally, we see that level of leadership, but I think that that's just something that was noteworthy to me as I got into this space, and I think is noteworthy in general. So if we think, first I'll talk about, from a statewide initiative standpoint, the Texas Innovation Alliance really spun out of Austin's efforts around the U.S. Department of Transportation Smart Cities Challenge grant. They were one of the finalists, and that brought a lot of focus through the University of Texas at Austin, which then spun out to say, we really need to look to align transportation and mobility projects across the state of Texas. And so that's a nonprofit P3, or should be calling it a P4. I love that migration to that. Across the state. And so from a statewide perspective, mobility is kind of the first major coordinated initiative in Texas. When we think about San Antonio, one thing that San Antonio is doing exceptionally well is creating that direct connection between the city and startup communities. And I know that was mentioned on the last panel. And so it's something that cities have struggled with. They want to support the entrepreneurial community, but procurement often is an issue with that. Startups don't have the capacity to go through that whole process, and therefore they're just not able to get that foot in the door. But San Antonio, working with an organization called CivTech, has created a very direct and easy mechanism for startups to get small contracts with the city as a starting point to develop that credibility. In Austin, there's a number of pieces that are in motion, obviously, but they did receive a grant to use blockchain to support the homeless community. One of the major issues for the homeless population in accessing services is they continually lose their identification documents that are required to access these services. So they're using blockchain to create a obviously very secure ID card that can allow them to not have issues getting those services that will help elevate them out of that circumstance. And then obviously in Dallas, I'm with an organization called the Dallas Innovation Alliance, which is a nonprofit P4 working with the city of Dallas. And because this is most familiar to me, I just wanted to give you a little bit more color of an example of what we've done and how we've done it. But in terms of how we're all working together from a city perspective, we really, obviously we keep very close touch in terms of what problem areas are we focused on, and how do we solve them together and understand the lessons learned kind of real time. So before I undertake an initiative I know Austin is working on, for example, I want to say, what should I not do at the inset? You really just don't want to replicate the wheel in a good way or a bad way. So how can we avoid hitting the same hurdles? So our organization, our mission is to support the city of Dallas in the execution of its Smart Cities objective. And so what we look at is, because we're a freestanding organization and we don't have to go through procurement, we can move exceptionally quickly compared to an internal initiative within the city at the inset. So what we know is our first initiative was the fastest to market in the country. We went from sitting down and creating those initial use cases, because again, identifying those problems we want to solve at the beginning is obviously critical to success. So the time period between getting that done and putting these projects in the ground was 10 months. And so what we understand from other cities is typically that takes 3 times as long to get something integrated there. We work with almost 36 partners across sector, and I work with over 20 departments within the city of Dallas. And so one of the pieces, I know I am hearing a lot of talk about how pilots are not necessarily the most effective anymore and they rarely scale. I think if those pieces aren't in place at the beginning, that can be true. But what I think in Dallas particularly, one of the highest values of doing a pilot like this was the education of different departments and really getting the buy-in from the city, because until city council understands what smart city means and why it's important and why they should invest in it, none of this is going to move forward. So we knew that if we could provide a physical demonstration that provided that level of education and got departments to start talking to each other, that was going to be a major win, and the city is already internally seeing a lot of momentum towards scaling. We believe as part of the value of us being able to go in and undertake that education step. Okay, so we're not going to talk about all this. Our first phase was a living lab with 3 objectives. So we have 9 integrated projects within a corridor in downtown Dallas. We wanted to show both the value of the projects individually from an ROI perspective, but we also wanted to really illustrate, thank you, the value of using the data cross-project, because that's where you get the cumulative value of these investments. Okay, we're not reading all of this. We just released our case study from the Living Lab. I just want you to focus on these 5 big bubbles, and then please download the case study on our website. But when we talk about the problem statements to solve, I have 30 seconds. Resource efficiency being one, obviously from an environmental perspective. Neighborhood revitalization includes economic impact, pedestrian traffic and public safety, citizen engagement and service delivery related to how we provide service and information to citizens. Public health, environmental, and green space. We're developing a smart park within the innovation district we've created. Mobility, we're focused on parking right now, but working with the transit authority to undertake this. Sorry, guys. Last piece in terms of connecting the startup community is we're launching a Smart Cities Incubator, again, across sector from partners launching this, but how do we develop a regional ecosystem surrounded on solving civic and urban challenges? And we'll be launching that formally later this year, but are just really excited to continue to collate that community and create direct connections and improve business and quality of life here in Dallas and beyond to Texas. I thank you all for your time. These are examples of some of our partners, just so you can understand kind of the different industry sectors that we work with. So thank you again.
So we continue with Mr. TJ Costello, Director of Industry Solutions Group, Smart Connected Communities, and Transportation from Cisco.
You know, I was reminded last evening at dinner about how much this event has grown, and how I think when we were first here, we could all get together for dinner in one event. I don't think that's possible anymore, and it just goes to show you how from where this started to where it is now, it's pretty amazing. And sort of in that vein, you know, we might have talked about back then about this emerging trend of people moving into cities and what that meant. And really, as we've grown in this marketplace and we work across the globe with different customers, we've come to the realization that it's really about people. It's the human impact. We all live in cities. We do things like take our kids to school on a daily basis, and our focus has to be on the human impact. And there are events that you come across that remind you about the necessity of that. Recently, just last week, my colleagues and I were together for a planning session. I went home to Massachusetts, and my friend Renee went to California. And when she arrived home, she was in Northern California where the fires are, and she couldn't communicate with her family for a better part of a day. And her brother, thankfully her family was okay, and her brother and her father lost their homes to the fires. And it just goes to show you how important city services that we all consume and leverage, that we need to be part of, and what we're trying to work on. And so it's with this idea and these realities that when we really start to think about this realization, so Cisco wants to be a good corporate citizen, a good global corporate citizen. And what we're trying to work with our customers on is this idea of going from being the bridge to the possible, coming from the city that you are to the city that you want to be. And so when we start working with customers and clients and partners, it starts with what is it you're trying to achieve. So for example, in the city of New Orleans, they want to share the experience. They're a very tourist-rich city. They want to make sure that you get to see the best of New Orleans. And so they needed to deploy a public safety environment to make sure that when the millions of tourists that came to visit the city were safe. And so in order for them to share that vision of their city with their citizens, they needed to build the bridge and to, shockingly enough, connect it up. Of course, what's a networking company going to say after all? And our principles in terms of how we approach this are quite simple. We have to have a comprehensive portfolio, and we've got to work across a variety of use cases. But in each case, Jennifer mentioned San Antonio, so they came to us and said, hey, in the next 20 years, we're going to double the amount of miles traveled in the city. And the idea that we're not going to build double the number of roads, we can't financially or physically do it really anywhere in the world, probably nor should we. And so they're starting to connect up their traffic systems so that they can manage the assets more efficiently. But the reality is, what's even more important in that is that the United States Department of Transportation published a study that said 27% of the population can get to a job within 90 minutes. So imagine that if you double the number of miles traveled, how much, if you didn't start to provide smart city services and make those services more efficient, in the future, could the number of people double from 50% now traveling 90 minutes to get to a job? It becomes, delivering these services and enabling our partners starts to become a real economic viability and inclusive opportunity. Second, our solutions have to have practical value and have to last. What does that mean? In the last session, they talked a lot about GDPR. So we have to make our solutions viable so that compliant with the various policies, as an example, because people now want to make sure that they can control their data and sustain their privacy when they start to do these solutions. So we as stakeholders have to make sure that we build these solutions in a locally compliant fashion. Additionally, as we approach this marketplace, we have a corporate social responsibility around the human impact. At Cisco, we signed up to partnership with Global Citizen, whose stated goal is by 2030 to eliminate poverty globally. And so for us, we put our money where our mouth is and made a major investment in Santa Clara County, where our corporate headquarters, to start to begin that process of addressing some of the homeless issues that we have in Silicon Valley. And finally, we have to do it with partners and ecosystems. There's no one person. I was proud to see your slides from a few minutes ago about all the people in Dallas and all the people in Texas, and I was grateful that I knew just about everybody there. But we need the partners and ecosystems to do it. No one company, no one city, no one partner can do it, and you've got to work across a variety of boundaries, internal and external. And if I had to sum it up in a simple framework, the best place to start with your partners, with your customers, is to work on a shared vision. Once you find out what the human impact, why does somebody need to do something? It's not to do a bright, shiny object. It is not to do a pilot. It is, what is the core fundamental service that you're trying to provide, and what's the impact you're trying to make on it? When you start with that as your guiding principle, and you have these tenets and pillars behind you, that's where you can be successful. And I just want to say thank you. Now I think I've got us back on track. I think I stole a few minutes back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costello. So we may continue with Mr. Gundogan.
Okay. Thank you. It's a tough issue speaking after two native speakers, but I will try the best what I can do. I will talk about Smart City Istanbul, what we did, how we collaborate with the stakeholders. Just a few things about ISPAC, what ISPAC is doing. ISPAC is the technology company of Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. That means we are responsible all technology, R&Ds, implementation and maintenance of technology around Istanbul and other cities. We are doing smart lighting, smart transportation systems, navigation systems, electronic detection systems, security systems, parking systems, etc. If you visit Istanbul, what you see in Istanbul, everything, most of things done by ISPAC or their ecosystem companies. Today's topic is smart city, but we have so few minutes, so therefore I skipped what smart city is. But I heard from a book, I read from a book that is said, no mayor would like to have a dumb city. So every city is smart, but we will measure how they smart, how much they smart, and what is the smartest city to improve the quality of life of the citizen. But there, one thing I would like to mention, generally we talk about big data, open data, IoT, and innovation. Most of people says that smart city is big data, smart city is open data, or innovation is smart city. It's not. Smart city is improving quality of life. Therefore, 100 or 1,000 years ago, people, politics, culture, and history we had in our cities because of economic development. And then the technology comes to the cities with transportation systems, mobility, communication, etc. Now we are talking about the high and poor technology for smart city, but it is only enableable of smart city, having a smart city. In technology side, of course, we need to have smart buildings, smart campuses, and then we will establish a smart city with these technologies. But to simplify having a smart city, we in Istanbul, the ISO try to have in 6 domains, but we have 8 domains in Istanbul with smart people, smart energy. We divided energy and environment into 2 groups because we think that environment will primary issue in the future. Therefore, we divided energy and environment. We also add security because if you need to have first a secure city before you will have a smart city. Therefore, we divide also security from other issues. And we have in Turkish, we have a very nice definition of smart city. It's difficult to translate. Therefore, I have only some points of our definition is improving quality of life, having efficiency, and effectively use technology and data only as an enableable, and work with stakeholders and have in the future a sustainable city for our children, for our next generation. How to be reached? I will explain how we reached to project in Istanbul. We first changed our organization structure in Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, also in İSPAK. We created 2 teams in Metropolitan Municipality. They are responsible for improvement of smart city projects, and in İSPAK side, they are responsible for development of smart city project. And we defined our smart city vision, we defined our smart city definition before we start. Therefore, we need to go around to other cities, what they are doing, what the smart city, they are defining the smart city and our perspective of smart city. After that, we had a very deep current state assessment because Istanbul is 15 million population, has a 15 million population. That means we have so many stakeholders in Istanbul. It's very difficult to take their ideas that they are thinking about smart city, to what they are doing about smart city, because most cities working as a silos. You need to break these silos. Before you will break these silos, you need to go these silos and define what they are doing. It was a very difficult issue. I will explain later. And then where to reach, we defined our strategies, and we need to also have a smart city architecture that we also work with international companies. What about our ecosystem? We started with Frost & Sullivan for literature review and benchmarking of the cities, and then we did with Ericsson current state assessment. We worked for strategy phase with Ernst & Young, and for smart city architecture we worked with Cisco. Now we are on the last phase, approval phase. If the municipality approve in 15 days, we will have our smart city architecture, and then for technical specs we will use these definitions and we will use these standards in our future projects, technology projects, etc. Of course, we have also NGOs for developing these strategies. We have governmental issues in Istanbul, ministries, the Department of Ministries in Istanbul. We have 28 municipal companies. We have 39 local districts. Each district has their own mayor. It's also difficult. They have their strategies, they have their projects, etc. We have municipal departments in Istanbul. More than 100 departments we have. Their they have their strategies about tourism, about security, about other issues. And we also work with universities because we need to develop not only technology, but also we need to consider sociology, urban design, etc. We also work with universities, and we are working now, and we worked before with local companies and also startups. We have a Grant Istanbul, Zemin Istanbul in Turkish, Grant Istanbul, there's incubating center, Living Lab, and other technology offices. In these Living Lab, we support the startups in Istanbul. First, best practice I explained earlier, and then current state assessment. As you see here, more than 800 surveys, more than 200 sessions we need to have, and about 700 interviews and persona analysis, etc., to study what Istanbul has now and then what they would like to do in the future. Therefore, it was important and critical issue having an ecosystem before you, when you're doing current state assessment, and working with this ecosystem to the future, to designing the strategies, to having these projects. Therefore, we had in our ecosystem, we defined our stakeholders in each domain, and we work until we finish the project. We work with them to the end of the project. After that, vision and strategy with these stakeholders, we also had meetings, special meetings, and then together mind map meetings, etc. We also investigate the other cities' visions, social media analytics, what the citizen would like to have, what kind of city they would like to have. After this analysis, we create our manifesto and we create our visions and projects. We don't want to have a second strategic plan of Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. We would like to have a creative, project-oriented, new smart city map of Istanbul, and that created, we created 101 projects, smart city projects, including the other projects of Istanbul. Finally, we designed a technological architecture of Istanbul, not only metropolitan municipality, but also governmental issue. We would like to create our service portfolio, create our application architecture, and define the data and standards that they would like to have in future technical specs. And that is an example of the RFI that we created digitally, smart lighting RFI, Istanbul RFI, economic development platform, domestic waste management, etc. For these platforms, we also developed our RFI. In next year, with 2019, we will have new tenders about these platforms to create in Istanbul. The definitions and standards, etc., are defined with Cisco. Now we are waiting for new projects. For roadmap, we first have a priority of our projects. Which project we need to start directly, which project we need to start in 3 years, and which projects we need to start in near future. I don't have any time, but I'm finishing. It's also Turkish, very nice Turkish definition of our manifesto. We will also translate to English in near future. That is, we define here in this manifesto our mission, what we think about smart city, our vision, what we think about for the future, and our duty about our duty for the smart city. And that was the first phase of the smart city project of Istanbul. It took around 2 years. Now we are in the second phase. We will update our current state assessment. We will also have a new smart city index of Istanbul, etc. These projects also started at beginning of this month, and we would like to have finished also in 1 year this second phase. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gundogan. And our last panelist, we welcome to the lectern to Dr. Weibin Li from the city of Taipei.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I will introduce the result of smart city developing in Taipei. We have two very simple slogans here. The government is a platform and city is a living lab. It's very simple, but everybody can understand the complexity behind the scene. Okay? So this is also implied that our mindset. We are not trying to define the smart city because we treat the smart city as a way to achieve sustainable and livable. So we try to apply the smart city concept to improve the living quality. So for us, the mayor, leading the team of the city government, we spend a lot of time to understand what's the meaning of sustainable and livable. Okay, so all the projects in Taipei City, not talking about the smart city, you must align to the objects, the sustainable and livable city. That's what we want to do. Okay. So here is the major problem. While we're talking about the innovation, because the smart cities, sometimes we talk about the smart innovation. But however, the government is a system. The system is so, not flexible, and they are seek to sustain stability. We are not talking about the innovation because there are a lot of uncertainty that will make us feel the risk. The risk will affect the election result. So it's very terrible result if a lot of fails. So that's the reason why we must have a mechanism in the very first beginning, while we are talking about a smart city. We try to do that is that for the top-down principle, all the agency provide a proposal. They need the element of innovation, but they have no time to talk about innovation. They talk about a lot of red tapes in their routine jobs. So we try to bring the innovation into the agency. So how we can do that? That is what we are thinking about. Another problem is the bottom-up projects. There are a lot of energies in Taiwan, but they have no opportunity to contact with the agency to talk about their ideas. So we need a platform. The platform must make some space for the innovation could be happen. Not only in the government, but also in the private sectors. So, but it's impossible to encourage the officials to have the time to talk about that. So we recruit some talent people here. So we build up a PMO, the TPMO, the Taipei Project Management Office, to deal with the company cat behind the proposal, because they want to talk with some agency. Because the barrier is because all the agencies are silos. So you need to break the barriers. Someone will help you to do that. So that my department is build up the TPMO and help the private sector to penetrate. Maybe we can say penetrate into the public sectors, so they can provide their ideas. But we do a lot of POC, the POC, the proof of concept. It's not the same as the industry talk about the POC. We are trying to use the small and diverse proposals, the small and diverse, the experiment to convince the agency, to convince the officials this is a good solution for you to adopt. So that's very interesting ecosystem that we have built. For the 3 years, we have a lot of result here. In the very first beginning, we try to give the goals of the TPMO. We have 3 objectives. One is changing the cultures. Just I said, that the silo between the different departments, the barrier is so high. So we need to break the barriers and engage stakeholders. We are all, in governments, we have the proposal just include some professors into the closed door, and we tell them that the project is what you want. So we are really not really understand the desire of the people. So we try to engage with the people, but it's really a risk for the officials in the government. So we try to the TPMO will be a buffer, okay, to reduce the risk that the officials may encounter in the future for the innovation solutions. And the last one is facilitate innovation. You can see the numbers. The numbers is the real numbers that we have it's about 35. The agency has cooperated with, is co-work on the platform, and over 400 ICT vendors and research institutions have involved. And we also have over 150 POC projects deployed in the Taipei to see whether the idea is good or not. Okay? The other part is the citizen participate. So we need to communicate with the citizens, but we are not good at that because we are government. Okay? Okay? So this is a number, just a number. The number just implies there are a lot of people, a lot of private sectors, a lot of city agencies want to involve together to make the city more sustainable and livable. The numbers mean that, for example, the 24th project means that we have cooperated with the transportation department because the transportation problem in Taipei is very serious, severely. Okay, so everybody care about the transportation problem. So we cooperated with, there are 24 ideas have been deployed under the control of the transportation department. Because the time is so limited, I will speed up, okay. There's a bottom-up POC project, there are 154. Okay, this one I must say, there are 14 cross-cutting projects. It means there is a project across several agencies. Okay, this is very important for us. Once you have a good example of best practice, the other agency will imitate the process. They will understand the new innovation is benefit for them. Okay, so this is also we are very encouraged. There are 14 cross-cutting projects in our in Taipei City. Okay, there are 154 bottom-up projects here. Okay, so there are numbers. The numbers means that for example, the concept discussion, there are 6 of them in the very first beginning was stopped because the idea doesn't work. Okay, because we have their experience, they have their experience. They are always talking about the product, but we are talking about the solutions. So we are now can involve the citizens. So we just can understand a lot of maybe the regulation problem, especially for a regulation problem. Okay, the projects, there are a lot of ideas, but they don't understand the details of the regulations. So we can help them to find the possibility very, very early. So we try to build up the system that is fail quickly, but win big. Okay. So this is the other number. There are only 1/3 of a project is success. There are 2/3 of project have failed, and they can redesign their system and come back to the platform again. Okay, there is some of examples I will show you. The airbox in Taiwan is very famous. There are about 2,000 units of airbox have spread in all over Taiwan. So the initiatives in Taipei, the solution also copied to the other cities, for example, the South Korea and Malaysia. Okay, this iTrash. iTrash is very interesting because in Taiwan you want to deal with your trash. It's a very terrible idea. Experience because the time is limited. So I will tell you that at this time you can deal with your trash. The other time you cannot do that. So there is automatic garbage recycling integration system, and the people love this solution very much. Unfortunately, there are some regulations limited the solution to scale. So they are trying to understand the problem. The agency try to understand the problem and maybe modify the regulations. Okay, this structured monitoring system that we are cooperated with a European company that have the grant from the H2020. This is very important for us. Okay, there's another AI solutions. They are do experience in Taipei and now go to the Netherlands in Amsterdam. Okay. This is a smart city symbol. There are a lot of details behind the scene. If you are interested, please attend the Smart City Summit and Expo next year, 2019 in Taipei. We are welcome all of you to there. We will prepare some solution tools for you to understand the details. Okay. This is also another global organization of smart cities because we have a lot of POCs talking about with the other cities. So we understand that may be a good time to leverage the other cities together to do some POC, to understand the possibility of the new solutions, to understand the context, the different context on the different cultures. Okay, thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Wei-Bin Lee. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we're going to thank our panelists for joining us today, and everybody's welcome to approach them afterwards. So we're going to have to wrap up by our chair, Alice Charles. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. So we've had 3 wonderful sessions here. And I'm not going to take too much of your time, but I'm just going to pull out a few core principles that I've heard today. So I've heard very much in terms of the smart city projects that are being developed in the various cities that were involved in the sessions, that smart city projects need to focus on ensuring that whatever innovations are being introduced in cities, that they're people-centric, first and foremost, that they do more with less. So they cut out peaks within the system, and they also unleash spare capacity. So before we invest in additional infrastructure, let's be more efficient with what we have. We've also heard about the value of small-scale infrastructure thinking and the need to drive sustainability within cities. We've heard about how cities can be living labs, but we need to get smart city innovation to scale as well. So in terms of collaboration models, I'm going to quote Jennifer. The big thing we've heard is nobody can do it alone, that we've all got to work together. So cities are agents of change. Cities need to break down silos within cities. Cities need to work with cities. Cities need to work with all levels of government as agents of change. They need to leverage the startup community within their cities, and they need to be inclusive and ensure that they bring in citizens in every way, shape and form, whether it's leveraging social media or creating platforms to enable it. And they also need to leverage academia and civil society and research institutes within their cities as well. And finally, they do need to work with the private sector, but it's no longer the 3 Ps as we originally heard it, it's now 4 Ps. So public-private partnerships need to include the public as well. So thank you very much for being involved in our sessions, and feel free to connect with everybody afterwards. Thank you. Bye-bye.